Lights, camera, action. Today on Conversations with Charlie, we have a very special guest, the co-founder of Radical Media, Jon Kamen. Hey, so how you doing?
I'm good, Charlie. Good to see you. If it's not on a bike or across the street at the restaurant, what the hell?
Exactly.
Here we are zooming.
We're zooming, yeah. Thank God that that momentary period where I was actually in the restaurant business, I got out of it. But what's there now is very nice.
It's true.
Austria Carolina that moved in that brought the old vibe back.
Yeah, they did a good job.
Yeah. So, I wanted to start off by, rather than winding the clock back, to talk about what you're up to now. I mean, you guys do absolutely everything in content creation. So, you've got projects that you're doing with NASA, you have projects that you're doing with streamers, documentary, Broadway shows. There's no area of and still steady with, I'm sure, with a steady flow of commercials. What are you up to right at the moment? I think you had been working on something with Michael, actually, the Broadway show.
Yeah, we just finished a Broadway project with Michael John Moore, and but listen, we never have wanted to be pigeonholed into one particular genre. We are, as a company, as you may know, over the door of all of our offices, it always says Radical Media, never established. And for me, that's a mantra that we try to live by. And from a content standpoint, I'll admit my interests might be somewhat eclectic, and they lean towards the nonfiction. So nonfiction is obviously the area in which we are becoming better known for. But as you know, because you've known me a long time, we do lots of things here as a company, and it's part of being radical and enjoying it from a standpoint of the different crafts and disciplines that we represent as a company. And we did start in advertising, I'll admit. We still do a lot of advertising, and we're proud of that work still, and it amazes us as to how much of it there still is for us to do. But I always used to say to my partner, Frank Sherma, that the entertainment business was the thing that was going to keep us relevant as a company, because a lot of commercial production companies come and go. Some have been around a really long time, but that's all they do is make commercials. I woke up one day and decided I didn't want to, have my tombstone say he made a really good Nike commercial. So I began to pursue things beyond traditional advertising, and documentary films became a bit of a signature for the company. We produced several Academy Award-winning documentaries: The Fog of War with Errol Morris,
yes,
the Metallica Some Kind of Monster film with Joe Berlinger.
Yep.
I'm a one-time Grammy Award winner for The Concert for George, George Harrison's memorial at Royal Albert Hall. We did, films with Jay-Z, Fade to Black, and started, doing our musical legacy, carried on to countless musical docs with MTV and others that we've always enjoyed doing and still do to this day, with moving on to the first original ground up Netflix film, documentary film. The first ground up documentary film was What Happened, Miss Simone, and went on to the Academy Awards. Our Paradise Lost series, it went on to Academy Awards for Joe Berlinger and Bruce Sinofsky. So we've had this incredible moment for ourselves in terms of our documentaries. And then, of course, now we do a lot of nonfiction programming, crime scene and abstract and endless Sons of Sams and other
And
Ted
and you
Bundy
did the whole
killers, etc.
and you did the whole Iconoclast series that's over now.
Iconoclast, in some ways, Iconoclast as a series on Sundance for 6 years kind of kicked things off. It didn't suck that we then spent another 6 years with Oprah Winfrey with a little series called Masterclass, and life continues. We just finished a new series with Oprah this year with a guy named Prince Harry for Apple called The Me You Can't See. So we work, we're platform agnostic. We work with everybody: Netflix, HBO, Disney, Hulu, Discovery, A&E, History Channel. We're really proud of the work that we've been able to do for all of our various partners. And we're enjoying a moment in which we're quite prolific across the company in so many areas of entertainment and even in experiential entertainment. We have a new company that we've created called Illuminarium Experiences. So.
And what is that focusing on? Is that focusing on exhibit oriented, immersive situations, sort of like virtual reality, augmented reality, stuff like that?
We practice a lot of experiential marketing for great companies like American Express and Chanel and Nike and others. And at one point I turned to the team here and I said, we should create some of our own experiential concepts. We partnered with David Rockwell, the architect. We created a company called Illuminarium, and along came a gentleman who's raised us quite a bit of money and has become the CEO of the company. And Illuminarium was born in Atlanta starting this July. And we're getting ready to open an Illuminarium in Area 15 in Las Vegas in this coming March, with others to follow in both Chicago and Houston and Miami after that.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Take me back to the era, going back, not that I want to linger there, but back to when you started. Were you with Henry Sandbank, or was it even before that?
Yeah, so I guess you're really hearkening back to my roots. There was a time in the 70s and 80s, a lot of photographers were getting into this thing called television because it looked like it was going to stick after 20, 30 years of television advancing itself. A lot of photographers decided to become directors. I had worked with many photographers who enjoyed that transformation of their careers. And Henry Sandbank being one of them, who offered me to become his partner way back when. And we had a company called Sandbank Kamen and Partners. We expanded that company both domestically, New York and Los Angeles, but we also had offices internationally. And at one point, when Sandbank reached the ripe old age of 60 something, and as all good people think they should retire at that age, he announced that he was going to kick back a bit, and both Frank Sherma and myself decided to transform the company into Radical Media in 1993, and we've been Radical Media ever since.
And really, the first, I mean, I've been around across the street from you when I started out watching the company grow. But it seemed like it was really the late 90s, early 2000s that your pivot to going into the unscripted happened, because those are the dates when the docs started to flow in 2000.
Well, it was, and we enjoyed an incredible amount of success as a commercial production company in the 90s. We were working with great partners and produced some really groundbreaking advertising work that won lots of awards and accolades. And we were very, very proud of that. I had an older brother that only an older brother could yell at you as he could. He was a very successful composer and producer in his own right. and he was worried about his little brother not getting involved in the more creative fields of entertainment. It was Michael Kamen, the composer and conductor and producer of little groups like Pink Floyd and a couple of big movies like, the Die Hards and the Lethal Weapons and the Brazils of the world, etc. Michael, thought that his little brother ought to get involved in some things more creative than just making television commercials. And after his stern warnings, I woke up in a cold sweat one night and realized he's right. I better start now. And so in the late 90s and early 2000s, we began producing films. And one of the earliest results of that was winning an Academy Award for The Fog of War.
Fog of War, of 2003. I mean, talking about out of the gate. Yeah, and it was around the same time. It was all in a row. It was Fade to Black and What Happened to Miss Simone happened later on. But
we became quite prolific, and the programming began to follow that from a reputational standpoint. Docu-style programming became popular, and that's where the Sundance Channel came in and invited us to launch Iconoclasts with them. And so the concept of entertainment was not, I'm not going to say out of boredom of the advertising business, but I've been in the ad business for a long time, and I knew we needed to diversify the company, and I knew that it wasn't going to be enough for me to continue to service the ad business over all those years. Frank and I focused on, the success of the ad business, parlaying that into being able to transform the company. And there were only a few commercial production companies that have been able to transform themselves as much as we have. Of course, there's Anonymous, and the precursor to Anonymous being Propaganda Films. Certainly Sir Ridley Scott's had his success as RSA, but he very much ran scot-free as a completely separate entity from RSA Films. But Radical, we like to keep it all under one roof. We have 4 offices around the world. We're in New York, Los Angeles, and London and Berlin now. We used to have an office in Shanghai. And we also had an office in Paris and Sydney, Australia, at one point in time. But we've reduced our footprint a little bit to focus on the work in the markets that are the most viable for us as a company.
And for me, it's like you have all of that going on, and then in the middle of all of the unscripted stuff you were doing, going back to what we just spoke about before, you dove in headfirst into capturing Broadway productions. Tell me the story of how that began. Am I correct in saying that Rent was the first one?
That's quite accurate. I wasn't sure if you were aware of that, but Rent was our first excursion. We got to know the producers of Rent. It was Kevin McCollum and Jeffrey Sellers. Sony had approached us. There was a division of Sony that was looking into this concept of creating what they called a hot ticket, which was going to be taking a super event like Rent, which was closing on Broadway after its incredible run and legendary run. And we filmed the final performances of Rent on Broadway, turned around and edited it in ridiculous time. I don't know how we did that. It actually boggles my mind now. If you get to watch this film, it's really quite beautiful. I never like to think of those as capturing Broadway. I always have referred to them as cinematic interpretations of a Broadway show. So we don't just film it like a television show. We obviously do starts and stops, work with the directors of the original productions and the shows, Michael J. Warren worked with us back then, even on that project. And we benefited from having a relationship with the producers and trust of the talent, that we were able to take an experience like Rent after they had already made a movie of the production of Rent.
Right.
Which
That's right. That's right.
didn't do very well, and Sony distributed that movie. So this was kind of a little bit of a make good for the Larson family, and you know, it took a little bit of convincing that capturing the live entertainment in this cinematic interpretation that we were doing was considered sacrilege at the time. But actually, we were just talking about it the other day when we were screening some of the earliest rough cuts of the film with the cast and some of the creative team. Their jaws were all wide open because they had never really seen themselves performing quite like that before on Broadway. Broadway normally only ever made what they called archive films, that are 1 or 3 camera films that captured a performance for the archives, but they didn't have anything that truly captured the nuances of an amazing performance. And in the case of Rent, with someone like Renee and some of the other incredible talent that performed in that in that final production of Rent, it was mind-blowing not only to see themselves, but to know for the Larson family, and I'll never forget this, Jonathan Larson's father would call me every month for about 6 months, thanking us profusely for finally preserving his son's work and having something that he could continuously see of his son's work after the show had closed.
Fantastic.
And from that one production, not only did we earn the trust of the producers, and Jeffrey became and Kevin have become really good friends. We went on to work on In the Heights. We went on to work on Shrek at one point in its short-lived Broadway career. We're actually dealing with one of the producers of Shrek right now on a very successful Broadway show that we're excited to be filming at one point next year. We developed a great relationship with the cast and the creators of In the Heights. At the time, Lynn had just basically left Freestyle Love for Supreme, his troupe, for a period of time in which he was pursuing the script that he had written, or the play that he had written, In the Heights, the musical. And we had the privilege of documenting In the Heights from some of its earliest workshops all the way through to the night that it won the Tony Award. And it was a great, great experience with the entire cast, literally embedded in their bedrooms and in their apartments, and waking up with them every day and following them as they all were young talent pursuing their careers on Broadway, which naturally have become legendary since then. Each and almost every one of them is now a star in their own right. We did a documentary for In the Heights that took a little bit of convincing of PBS, but it was a wonderful, wonderful promotion of both the show and a great insight into this young talent. We had already begun filming a little bit of Freestyle Love Supreme that Andrew Freed, many years later, 15 years later practically, is just released as a film on Hulu. That Andrew was sharp enough to recognize the talent back then, and convinced me to give him a ticket to Edinburgh to the Fringe Festival to film this troupe. So we created a great bond with the with that team. And when Lin-Manuel was writing Hamilton, he came to see me with Jeffrey to see if we thought there was another documentary in this new show he was doing around our founding fathers. And we fondly called it Looking for Hamilton, sort of as a reference to Looking for Richard, that great
Al Pacino. Yeah.
Al Pacino film.
Yeah.
So this was Lynn's writing of Hamilton and his pursuit of putting the pieces together that eventually became, as we all know, the legend of a show that we followed as it went to the public theater, and then had the privilege of filming with the original cast within the final 2 weeks of their performance. Jeffrey called me proudly with Lynn to say, we're going to do it. And we did the same thing for Hamilton that we had done for Rent. We literally kept that in our vault for 4 years until Disney was able to persuade them to put it out during the pandemic.
Wonderful. And this is a perfect transition, actually, because one of my favorite sort of live show films that goes back, I mean, in 1984, when I started out in the business, I was a projectionist at a repertory movie theater in Somerville, Massachusetts. And we used to show cult favorites constantly. And one of the films that we would show repeatedly, annually, every year was Stop Making Sense, which leads me, of course, to what you guys did with David Byrne. That is, once again, an iconic work that actually is now back on Broadway because it was off. But you guys shot this, and to me, it's perhaps Stop Making Sense is perhaps one of the best live concert films I know of, right? And then you guys did what he has going today.
Stop Making Sense and The Last Waltz were both benchmark films in my career. For me, similarly to you, I could watch them over and over and over again. Yeah. Jonathan did such an unbelievable job with Stop Making Sense. David Byrne's vision then was magnificent. For me, it was a benchmark. And when we were actually asked if we would be, they were considering us for his most recent Broadway show, American Utopia. Mm-hmm. To me, I looked at that as the opportunity of a lifetime, the bookend of Stop Making Sense.
Yes.
It was, we inherited Spike with David's choice of director, which turned out to be a fantastic collaboration. We had worked with Spike before, and we certainly were proud to be able to support him and work with Ellen Kuras and filming it. We've had a lot of experience at that point, and we're recognized by the various investors, et cetera, with our experience in executing not only the logistics of filming a Broadway show, but the managing all of the realities of the unions and all of what else you need to do to be able to successfully film on Broadway. Again, something we'll endlessly be proud of. For me, one of the proudest moments of American Utopia is when I got the call from Gary Getzman, the original producer with Jonathan Demme of Stop Making Sense.
Wow.
Gary Getzman is Tom Hanks' partner in Playtone today.
Okay.
And right after Gary saw it in the first weekend it was released, he called me up and he said, "Well, you did it, kid. It's as good as it gets." For me, from Stop Making Sense to American Utopia, what a privilege to be a part of that legend. And David was fantastic to work with. The film turned out beautifully, and it's part of our repertoire of Broadway projects now. So thanks for adding that into the story.
I couldn't miss it. I mean, for me, this is just the most delicious stuff. And and the thing that I think of, because I'm, my mind always swims around where I sort of originated from, which was between the producer and the distributor, because I dealt with so many distributors over the years, including the films that you guys made, like Fade to Black and Fog of War, all of that. But what happened in the cinema business, and I've had guests like Ira Deutschman, Bob Burney, and people who are in that world come on and talk about this, is that the cinema environment has also pivoted, right? So the ballet, the opera, is brought to all parts of the country. I mean, there are actually cases of the Metropolitan Opera playing in another part of the country where people pay $25 for a ticket and show up in tuxes. I mean, this is a 2D experience of an elegant event not available for people geographically. I mean, I should be aware, but I'm not aware, with all the stuff that you guys have done on the Broadway end. Each of these, have they all been presented theatrically? I should know this. I don't. Or were they all done for streaming? I'm not aware.
Well, Hamilton was intended to be in theaters, and we suspect that Bob Iger convinced Lynn to allow them to release it on during the first wave of the pandemic. I have to tell you, the Broadway community was thankful, so appreciative, and so happy to see live theater at least being presented in as many homes as it was. So there was tremendous support and enthusiasm from the live theater industry as it was closed down when Hamilton was first released. You could only wonder how Hamilton might have done if it had been in theaters.
Right, I was going to say, right.
But, you can't imagine how many more millions of people have seen it, and it was attributed to a massive increase in both subscriptions for Disney, but Disney has admitted the number of times people have viewed that film is extraordinary. So for us, the world of streaming and video on demand is obviously almost coming of age in this last few years as the standard bearer. As we're tipping our toe back in the water of going to the theater again, it is really nice to see a great movie in a theater. And I've recently gone to a few myself, and
wonderful. Me too.
Thought how great it is and how much I miss it. But the world has changed. Technology has changed the world, and the way people will view things now in mass is quite different than it once might have been. Some films perhaps need an audience and need a theater. Some films perhaps do just as well on a television in someone's home. I think that finding both is where we ideally like to be. In the case of American Utopia, did have its drive-in theater premiere.
Fantastic.
The New York Film Festival. We opened the New York Film Festival at the Queens parking lot and by the World's Fair, and honked our horns as we sat there freezing on a cold night. We were supposed to premiere Summer of Soul at the Sundance Film Festival, which sadly was canceled that year, but was going to have its premiere at the Rose Bowl parking lot as an outdoor screening in Los Angeles. And then the spike got so bad in Los Angeles that they canceled even the outdoor screenings in Los Angeles. So we had to settle for a virtual premiere of Summer of Soul for when it premiered at Sundance. But when it was finally purchased by Fox Searchlight, along with Onyx and Hulu, it was partly a commitment to a theatrical release. Now, a theatrical release in the summer of 2021 was not necessarily the most exciting time for people to go to theaters. We weren't going out yet really to theaters ourselves, and not as many people were going to be going out to see a documentary if they were going to go to the theater.
I was one of those wacky people, but yes, you're right. Not many.
We had our fair share of wacky devotees. Thank you very much. But it did have, and I think one of the proudest moments for both myself and Dave Sorelnik, my partner here in crime, for Summer of Soul. Dave runs the entertainment group at Radical now as the president of entertainment. Dave Sarelnik and I always dreamed of the premiere of Summer of Soul being back in the park in Harlem. And for this past Memorial Day weekend, thanks to the folks at Fox Searchlight and even our tapping into our relationship with one of our advertising partners, Target, we were able to host the first public screening of Summer of Soul with a live audience. Was in the park where it all happened. So,
Wow.
To be able to bring it back to that park, and of course it was, Mount Morris Park in the day, but now is the Marcus Garvey Park. 51 years later, we were back in the park, screening it for the community for a free screening of Summer of Soul. And for us, that was, in spite of a little bit of rain and everything else, an accomplishment that we couldn't have been more proud of. And it was so exciting to see it with that audience.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, what a tremendous way to launch. Yeah, for that.
Yeah, it was an exciting night. And, it's since had a good theatrical run, but not, as I said before, unfortunately, during a period of still uncertainty with the pandemic and not as many brave people who were willing to go out to watch a doc that they could watch on Hulu, watch at home on Hulu.
Exactly.
So,
I mean, for me, over the summer, it was Summer of Soul and Anthony Bourdain's Roadrunner that made it out that was you were able to see in theaters. But yes, absolutely, yeah. It's just, yeah.
Our luck once again could have been Hamilton in the theaters, could have been Summer of Soul in theaters. I suspect, without a pandemic, we might have had two very successful theatrical runs. But we'll take all the accolades. Winning an Emmy for Hamilton was quite nice. We competed against our own American Utopia.
Amazing.
And we had a little bit of a laugh about having 2 out of 5 films in the category wasn't bad. We're enjoying that with Summer of Soul right now. It's competing even in the Grammys. It's been shortlisted against American Utopia. So we are sort of always competing against ourselves with some of our own product at this point.
I love it. So another sort of fun story for me anyway, because I'm as you know, I think as you know, I'm old friends with your director Joe Berlinger for a lot of years, and for the brief period that I was working as the GM over at Gigantic Studios when we did the mix for the Ted Bundy tapes. Mm-hmm. At that time, it was the first moment that in recent memory where something that was now launched as a documentary was simultaneously being made as a feature, which Extremely Wicked, which you guys also did.
Correction. We Joe did Extremely Wicked.
Okay.
We were finishing the Ted Bundy tapes for Netflix while we were working on the 4-part series of the Ted Bundy tapes. Joe got called in for an audition to direct the feature film based on Ted Bundy. Right. Well, nobody could have been better prepared than Joe to go in and audition for that film, because he knew more about Ted Bundy than anybody possibly could have, having prepped the Netflix show. And it's kind of a funny thing. We were on the sort of final post production schedule for Ted Bundy tapes when the feature film sort of reared its head, and as feature films go, you never really get too excited because they come and they go, and they might have happened, it might not have happened, but magically the casting with Efron and with Joe at the helm came together like that. And by the way, the research that we had done and the archival work that we had done was practically all the homework that the production of Extremely Wicked needed to be able to do the exceptional job that Joe was able to complete. So we were there in spirit for Joe for the movie. We were there physically finishing the Netflix series.
Yeah.
And as if you remember, the Netflix series dropped literally weeks before the movie itself was in theaters. So and then Netflix bought the film. So it was a great sort of 1-2 punch for a unique combination of a multi-part series and a fictionalized film.
Oh, yes.
Same story.
Well, I mean, it was for me because of my viewing habit for that particular project. My girlfriend and I tandem viewed. So we watched the doc and we went straight into the feature with barely a break in between. And I got to tell you, kudos to all sides, but theatrical. Wow, they really captured something quite
Joe really nailed it. And as a result, we're looking at other scripted. We're developing a new scripted project for Joe that he's quite passionate about, that we're in the middle of developing right now. So and as Joe is as prolific as he is in the true crime space.
Oh yeah.
Obviously, we just announced not just the season 2 of Crime Scene, but we picked up a season 3 and season 4 of Crime Scene, which just announced. We also have Joe is executive producing we did the Jeffrey Epstein story.
Yes,
and might be working on a little follow-up of that story, and we have a few other crime-based shows that Joe is extremely engrossed in, but is also looking forward to the relief of that with some new projects that we're doing that are quite a little bit less gory. They're crimes of sorts, but not of the same genre. So we're looking at expanding his vocabulary beyond
beyond true crime.
His true crime and Paradise Lost success.
Yeah. It's one of those blessings that is a blessing in disguise, but it became sort of the hottest form of content in general, right? I mean, it sells like hockey.
Yeah, there's a pretty big demand for it. We have several shows running at the same time for multiple platforms.
And I think ID dedicates itself to it, right? So there are channels and all that.
ID dedicated itself. We've had several shows on ID. We have several shows coming up on, we just premiered a show on Discovery the other day. We have more shows going on with Netflix and a new one coming up on Peacock as well.
Oh, interesting. So apropos of television, let's not forget one important program that I think we all remember and love, that you were involved in its inception, Mad Men. And I don't know, I love this. This is one of the great series of all time, but I don't have the story behind the story as to how you became involved, but who better to do Mad Men than the Mad Men themselves, right? I mean, you guys.
Well, that was part of it. At the time, we were working on continuing to expand and diversify our reputations. There was a gentleman here, Jack Leshner, who was a superb development executive, had been at Miramax with some of the legendary successes at Miramax, came to work here at Radical and was part of the team on Fog of War. And Christina Wayne came in with this script from a writer who'd been working on The Sopranos, who was anxious to see if somebody would pick up his own project while he was writing with David Chase on the 5th and 6th seasons of The Sopranos. And we had the privilege of reading the first draft of the episode pilot of Mad Men, and of course, being a student of advertising and knowing all of the fictionalized advertising agencies and stories that Matt was referring to in his pilot script, I said, we've got to do this. This is not like an option. We've got to make this. We've got to make this pilot. We didn't know that much about what we were doing in the area of contracts and relationships. Then I will say that I still call it the big fish that got away. But we had an incredible amount of fun making the offices here at Radical headquarters for the pilot episode, Emmy Award winning Smoke Gets in Your Eyes episode of Mad Men. We worked very closely with Matt. We brought together the team of Scott and everyone else who produced and art directed and filmed and directed the first pilot. It was a thrill to be part of it. It was a thrill to watch it evolve here in our very offices. We had a lot of fun in delivering that show. We had this crazy dream that nostalgically we wouldn't only tap into the golden era of advertising, but we would even tap into the golden era of advertising and find a single sponsor who would become the brand associated with this great show. And Matt was totally into the idea of a Hitchcock-like character who could tell you the moral of the story of each episode and get rid of the traditional advertising breaks that needed to take place on the AMC network. Unfortunately, what we never calculated is how excited the ad sales people at AMC were going to be to finally have a show that they could go out and sell against. And there was no way they were going to settle to have a single sponsor. But we were really, we got pretty close. And I'm often, when Josh Sapan, who went on to become the CEO of AMC, would introduce me, he'd always often say, you know, we kind of owe John one, you know, because all we did was that first episode. Matt wanted to move back to California. Lionsgate took over the show. Even AMC at a certain point got taken out of the loop in that Lionsgate bought the show. They deficit financed it. We didn't really have a leg to stand on. They flicked us off the producer line. And I miscalculated. I thought that Matt wanted to become a New Yorker. His wife at the time was having a very successful architectural career in Los Angeles. And he wanted to go back to better weather and a more hospitable place. And they'd just come and do some, you know, B-roll here in New York to fill in the New York scenes. But the original episode of Mad Men was produced here in New York.
Yeah, fascinating.
And cast in our offices, which was a whole lot of fun.
Amazing. Let's take a slight left turn, because I don't want to leave out something I know even less about than these other stories, which I didn't actually know all of the detail of.
Yeah.
Your relationship with NASA and the mission to Mars. Talk to me.
Well, you know, it was before the mission to Mars. We were actually working with NASA. A very dear friend of mine, family friend, a guy by the name of Scott Bolton, is an investigator chief investigator for at one point the Jet Propulsion Lab and for NASA, and the way NASA assigns missions. Probably about 12 years ago, I was at my niece's wedding, sitting next to Annie Lennox and Scott Bolton. And of course, we know what Annie was up to then, 12 years ago. But we both turned to Scott and said, "What are you up to, Scott?" And he said, "Well, I'm getting ready to do a mission to Jupiter." And was like, "What?" And he started explaining to us how he was planning this mission Juno for NASA to explore the planet of Jupiter. And we started getting involved in that. Actually, shortly after we produced Fog of War and won the Academy Award, a guy named Elon Musk called me and invited me to
What?
he invited me out to his factory in Hawthorne, California, and wanted to know if Errol was interested in doing a documentary about him going to Mars. And I remember coming back from the meeting with Elon. Errol didn't even go with me because we didn't even know we knew who Elon was. He was the PayPal guy who now wanted to go to Mars. But I remember my first conversation with him as he literally just had like parts and pieces of rockets on the floor of a hangar. And he was telling me that he was going to be building rocket ships to go to Mars. And I was like, well, that's really great. When do you think you're going to do that? And, you know, sounded like it was about another 20 years away. And he didn't really, you know, want to pay for the documentary, but he wanted to see if we wanted to make the documentary. And we kind of politely passed, being that we didn't believe this guy was for real in terms of his space exploration. We knew that he was crazy, but we didn't think he'd ever get as far as he would get. Ironically, you know, 15 years later, somebody at Fremantle, who was our partner at the time, had approached us that Elon was interested in doing a documentary about SpaceX. And one of my partners, Justin Wilkes, at the time, met with him. I said, you know, I met with him 10 years, 15 years before. He wanted to do the same thing, but he doesn't want to be in it and he didn't want to pay for it. It was like, well, who the hell is going to make a documentary about SpaceX if you're not even willing to be in it? He acquiesced a little bit and he said, well, you know, if you could get like, you know, James Cameron or Ron Howard to direct it, maybe I'll be in it. And little did he know, we knew that James was kind of busy with whatever success he had with Avatar or wherever he was going next. But we had a relationship with Ron Howard. We had made Made in America with Jay-Z and Ron Howard. And we knew that Ron had interest in doing documentary films from the Jay-Z experience. Yep. So we weren't afraid to call Brian Grazer and Ron and see if they were interested. So poor Elon was now stuck that we actually had Ron Howard in our pocket. And then, you know, as things happen in New York and only New York, I got invited to a signing, book signing for a friend of mine's book at Michael Bloomberg's foundation. And I went up to the signing. It was actually one of David Rockwell's books. And David is a very dear friend. He's the architect of our offices, a house of mine. So I'm up at the signing and I bump into another old friend of mine, a guy by the name of Stephen Petranek, who's a well-known science author and a well-known science editor. And I hadn't seen him for many, many years. We had toyed around about doing a television series with him based on a TED Talk he had given on the 10 ways in which for sure the world is going to end. And we couldn't sell that show. But I, you know, asked Stephen what he was up to. And he said, well, I'm writing a book about how we're going to live on Mars. And I said, well, that's funny. We're talking to Elon Musk about making a documentary about his pursuit of going to Mars. And he said, well, that'll be just about the guy who's going to do it. If anybody's going to do it, I think it's Elon. And I'm going to be going out to see Elon in like the next week or something and to talk to him about my book. His book, which he slipped me a copy of, was based on a new TED Talk he was going to do about how we were going to live on Mars. And I was flying out to LA reading a manuscript of the book with my hand shaking, and Justin Wilkes was sitting next to me. And I turned to Justin and I said, Justin, this is our television series. This isn't a movie. This is a television series based on the factual information that Stephen was laying out in the book. And so season 1 that we sold to National Geographic was based on Stephen's book. And we really truthfully started out in a hybrid model of part documentary, part scripted. While we were making it, Nat Geo was asking us for more and more scripted, and we started adapting it accordingly. But that was a fun mission, and it led to a second season. And I still say that we should have continued, but there've been many other different versions of it since then.
Interesting. I ran across something that I didn't know that you guys were doing on I think it's a channel on YouTube called it's
Thinker.
Thinker. It's an abbreviation of Thinker.
Yeah, THNKR on Thinker. We have over 1 million subscribers.
Wow.
We've had a couple 100 million views. It started as an experiment with Google when they wanted to create premium channels, and they seeded it. We're still trying to figure out what to do with it, but we had a lot of fun with it, and it's still growing to this day. We've continued adding a little bit to it, but we have more things to come on Thinker, because not that many people can boast over 1 million subscribers, and we've had a couple of amazing viral, fun films that have made it to the Thinker platform.
That's fabulous. Yeah, I'm fascinated by it, of course, because this show is on my little YouTube channel, but I love to see these viral successes. It's absolutely fantastic. I'm going to wind back the clock, because there is one thing I didn't know about in your relationship with the Rhode Island School of Design, where I have many of my old homies, Bob Jungles and Peter O'Neill, and people that I know that taught there. You're on a board there with, I think, Eileen Chaikin, I believe, who is also...
Eileen is the author of The Handmaid's Tale, and currently working with Dick Wolf on his series. My son got me into RISD. This is the reverse story. I am almost a high school and college dropout, but I'm the vice chair of the board of the Rhode Island School of Design. I might tell you.
How interesting! Yeah.
And it's my son who got me into RISD. My son was an industrial design student, and I was invited up to RISD to lecture. And the then president of the school said, "Would you ever consider joining our board?" And I felt like the Scarecrow in the Wizard of Oz. I finally got a brain. I don't have a degree, but being on the board made me feel as if I kind of have one, and I get to work with some extraordinary people on the board, and we've accomplished a lot. We have a lot more to accomplish, but we have an incredible board.
Yeah,
and it's very, very rewarding work in terms of what we do as a company and how we function as a company.
Yeah, it's a very important place. I mean, I knew a lot of film animators out of there over the years, and filmmakers.
Yeah, we've
out of there. Yeah.
Got several graduates from the school who work for us. Josh Pearson, the extraordinary editor of Summer of Soul and What Happened, Miss Simone. Josh was a fine art student at RISD, and now one of the great documentary editors of all time.
Wow, interesting. Another important topic that I like to at least land on once in every episode. It's important for me anyway. A career is ups and downs and challenges and fights and battles. I always, when I look at you and Frank, I see a straight arrow into the stratosphere, because it always looks like the journey that you guys took almost had no bumps in the road at all. Talk to me a little bit about what the challenges of building after you left, working with or for someone or with someone to creating your own company, and what some of the ups and downs were in building the business.
Well, I mean, I did work for some people, but when I partnered with Sandbank, I was really kind of creating a company as Sandbank Films, Sandbank Kamen and Partners. So I'd been running a company a very long time, and and reinventing that company as Radical was just an extension of what I had done.
Right.
Frank and I met. Frank worked in the advertising business. He lived here in New York and worked for the legendary Jay Chiat.
Oh, so he was an agency guy. Okay.
He was an agency guy. He moved out to California, and when he was moving out there, I told him to keep in touch. And famously, this guy every 3 months would actually call me. I couldn't believe that he actually listened, that he was keeping in touch. But at one point, he knew that Sandbank and I were contemplating opening a Los Angeles office. And he approached me with the possibility of perhaps he could run that office. And I had a famous walk through the Museum of Modern Art with Frank, telling him how important our integrity was to us as a company, and that if he were going to do that job with us and for us, how important it was for him to continue to extend that reputation to the West Coast. 30-something years later, Frank and I are still partners, and it's just an exceptional job that he's done. And I couldn't be more proud of him as the chairman of the Television Academy. And now, both of us were at one point in time chairman of the Commercial Industries Association, the AICP.
Yeah.
Frank has extended that to becoming the chairman of the Television Academy. And
wow,
it's quite an interesting time for him. He's done a great job. They've had their work cut out for them as well. And during this pandemic and with all of the challenges of the industry, he's done a fabulous job of leading the Television Academy, so much so that he's been reelected as the chairman just the other day for another 2 years.
Wow, that's fantastic. Fantastic.
And, as partners, we love each other very much. We have the benefit of being on two separate coasts. So, as he always puts it, we've been partners for 30 years and 3,000 miles might have a lot to do with it.
That's a good way to put it.
All right.
One last thing. I know you do have to cut out at 5, but you were, I mean, I was born here in New York, but you're a New Yorker by origin. Your mom and dad, Saul and Harriet, what were their influences, and what was their, I mean, the sort of role in perhaps the some of the decisions to do what you do today, back when you were growing up as a kid here in New York?
Well, I obviously blessed with having had the most amazing family and parents. I was one of 4 boys, the youngest of 4 boys. My father was a dentist in Queens, and my mother was a school teacher. Again, the values that they instilled on us, they were extremely liberal, very, very progressive in their thoughts. They shared that with us as children and encouraged us to pursue our dreams. They never really railroaded us into any one direction. So not by accident, but by choice, my oldest brother did become a dentist, as all good children follow their father's footsteps. But my other brother, Michael, became a composer and pursued his musical career. Another brother, who today is a doctor, pursued his musical career at the High School of Musical Art. And my father always used to kid around that my oldest brother became the dentist, played the guitar. My brother Michael played piano and oboe. My brother Lenny, who's a doctor, played the trumpet. And his youngest son, Johnny, played the TV. And I'm still playing the TV today. So little Johnny Kamen just never learned to play an instrument. I just learned how to play the TV.
Well, we're in the same band, so I enjoy that so much, and I know that you've run out of time, and we could talk endlessly, but I cannot thank you enough for joining me on yet another episode of my show. And
Thank you, Charlie. And you've done more homework on me than I may have remembered myself. Okay. Have a great day. Thanks again. And
Thank
we'll
you.
look forward to seeing you on the podcast.
Yes, thank you.
Bye for now.
Thank you. Bye.
For now.
The Pod Matrix.